And welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is reconcile. What does it mean to reconcile? It's an interesting concept because it actually seems to hold a polarity in and of itself. So should be an interesting conversation. But before we get started, let's take a moment to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells and your organs, and bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, energizing, electrifying all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's gently press our palms together. Very, very softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the deliciousness of that sensation and to allow yourselves to become present to the miracle of experiencing life through these physical, miraculous forms. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. And yes, today we're going to talk about what it is to reconcile, what is reconciliation. And I have to kind of start out with my nerdy thing, which is to read a definition. So I haven't, let me just see if, good morning, Rosalind. That's what I was looking for, comments. So great to see you. Thanks for chiming in. And today we're talking about reconciliation. And so here's my nerdy thing, the definition of reconcile. And there are several. So to cause a person to accept or be resigned to something not desired. So resignation, you know, I'm reconciling myself to the fact that it is, oh my, excuse me, that it is how it is and I can't change it. I'm reconciling myself to that, you know, I'm coming to terms with. And then on the other side, to win over to friendliness, to cause to become amicable. So to win over to friendliness, far from resignation, it's kind of a hopefulness, you know, to be able to reconcile with someone, to come to peace and harmony with someone. And here it says, another one is to compose or settle a quarrel or dispute. Another is to bring into agreement or harmony, make compatible or consistent. So for instance, reconciling our bank accounts, you know, to bring them into harmony, to make them consistent. So very interesting. And then there are a couple others that have to do with reconsecrating a church or a cemetery, or restoring to communion in a church. So an interesting word, right? Because one aspect has to do with resignation, and another aspect has to do with coming to a place of harmony. So good morning, good morning. Good morning, Dennis. You're so funny. Welcome, welcome. We're talking about reconciling and reconciliation. And it's interesting because I have a family member who has Happy New Year, Bernadette. Welcome. It's great to have you here with us. So good to Happy New Year to everybody. We were talking about the hopefulness that the new year brings for so many people. Maybe that, oh my, excuse me. I don't know if I'm processing something or if I'm just tired. I apologize for the yawns. Anyway, thinking about this idea of reconciling, like reconcile ourselves to our circumstances. It is what it is, right? And that might also be at play when we reconcile. Like I think of reconciliation as bringing together, like resolving differences. That's one of the ways to be looking at it. And I think it's really interesting. I have a family member who's kind of excommunicated me because of a difference of opinion and perspective about something, but hasn't communicated with me about it. I've heard about it, third hand or second hand, whatever. And I have been thinking about this word reconciliation because this is somebody I care about, and I've kind of reconciled myself, brought peace to myself, I guess, or resigned myself in a certain respect to that they have their vantage point, and there's not a whole lot I'm going to be able to do to change it until they're ready and willing, right? So I have been really present to this dichotomy in the word, to this seeming contradiction, of coming to harmony and resigning oneself. And maybe the step beyond resignation is reconciliation, like accepting, so maybe that's part of this. Maybe that's what unifies the seeming polarity in the word reconcile or reconciliation. What do you think? Like if I'm making peace with it being the way it is, then I'm reconciling. I may not be reconciling with the person directly. We may not be coming to an understanding or mutual agreement, but I'm finding a place of peace within myself around the circumstances, reconcile. And maybe that thought leads us into the notion of the transformation from I just lost the word. Resignation. Thank you. From it maybe that is the transformation that's possible for us from resignation to reconciliation, from feeling resigned about something to finding a place of peace to be present to that situation. So it's kind of interesting that the one word might have the process within it. So Rosalind says the activity of worrying keeps one immobilized. Inner reconciliation. I like this. As we invite without self-judgment, we can move from the past as we remember to trust who we really are in the light of truth in the light of the truth of love, and find peace in the now of the unknown as it becomes known. So there's a lot packed in there, Rosalind. Let's see. The activity of worrying keeps one immobilized. Inner reconciliation equals, as we invite without self-judgment, We can move from the past as we remember to trust who we really are in the light of the truth of love, and find peace in the now of the unknown as it becomes unknown. So I think what you're talking about is how, as we allow ourselves self-trust, as we allow ourselves to be present, then we have an inner reconciliation and inner peace that leads us away from worry. So I'm hoping I translated that well, or that I reiterated it, because I think I understand what you're saying. And inner reconciliation is alignment ultimately, right? And as you're saying, we remember to trust who we really are in the light of the truth of love. So as we connect and trust and create that inner harmony, then there is a natural reconciliation with ourselves, like a reunion and a creation of harmony. So Bernadette says, I feel reconciliation is a two-way process, and you can't if the other does not or will not acknowledge the difference of opinions. So I'm in that space too, Bernadette, where there is no communication from this other person except through a third party. And so I may not be achieving reconciliation directly with that person because they haven't made themselves accessible. However, I can achieve reconciliation within myself. Like I can reconcile myself to things as they are. And I can either do that through experiencing resignation or harmony. And I think that the distinction between resignation and harmony is that in the resignation, there's a giving up, and there's a sense of things should be different from the way they are. And like I'm resigning myself, I'm giving up, I'm I think that there's a sense of loss around that resignation. And when we talk about I'm reconciling myself to it, that that can have an aspect to it of giving up. And I also think that we can come to a place where we can find a place of peace and harmony in that reconciliation. And that's like, maybe it's almost like there are different frequencies of the word, right? So the lower level frequency might be resignation. The higher level frequency might be true creating harmony. So as we allow ourselves to not resist the way things are, to accept the way things are, to truly accept things the way they are, rather than residing in it should be different, I wish it were different, I want it to be different, to just say it is how it is, and to find that place of deep acceptance. Even I think that finding that place of deep acceptance of the way things are gives us a sense of peace and releases us from the loss and the sadness and the frustration and maybe the anger, because all of that is resistance to the way things are. So Bernadette, I agree with giving yourself harmony in the process. I share a situation with a family member also. I'm aware of that, Bernadette. And so you and I are kind of having this conversation in an intimate way. And Bernadette continues, but I don't even hear from third parties. It's just chirping in the wind, LOL. So I can tell you that hearing from third parties isn't necessarily soothing. Hearing from third parties isn't necessarily something that makes the situation more tolerable, because in a way there's I want to say not collusion, but there's kind of a support in a way from that third party, that, I mean, it's an awkward place for them to be, but that they're facilitating it, is that they're colluding in some sort of way, like they're permitting it, they're not stepping in, they're aware and they're not stepping in, like they're condoning it in a way. So I'm not saying that the third party thing is all that great either. But yeah, so I think that there is a place of non-resistance that we get to go to, or that maybe we can aspire to. How do we get to a place where we can accept the unacceptable? To accept that it is what it is. And to move into the place of trust that Rosalind was talking about, the place of trust where we can allow that life is perfect, like that all of it is perfect in its imperfections, or whatever, that maybe our perception of imperfections is just that, and a perception. When we find a place of peace and allowing, when we find a place of that inner harmony to allow that other person to go through what they're going through without making it personal, without focusing on the loss, without resisting the situation, then there may be more space for it to change. Who knows? So Rosalind says acceptance is not getting rid of anything, letting it happen, and it doesn't affect me. So as we accept something, we're just allowing something to be as it is. And we can still maintain our place of peace in the face of that. Is to allow that we all have different lives, we all have different paths, we all make different choices. And one person's choice, like I can be reactive to that person's choice, and yet it's their choice, right? People do all kinds of wild things, and I get to respond however I respond, so I can make space for it, make space for their choice, and then make my choices accordingly. So if we can get to this place of acceptance, it's interesting, because what it's meant for me is to release my desire to have anything other than the way things are, to be releasing my longing, for a relationship with this person. So I don't experience that at the moment. Part of me just says, well, it's a shame, and even that is resistance, because I'm judging the situation. But that's as deep as it goes at the moment. There's not a more profound wound, because it's not personal, it's their thing. It's about me for them, but it's not about me. It's about them going through whatever they're going through, projecting whatever they're projecting. And if I take it personally, that's on me, because they're just doing their thing. I may think it's misguided, which I do. Um, and I don't particularly understand it, but that's where they are, so it's again, it just brings me back. Good morning, Isabella. It was so good to see you the other day on the meditation and the prayer circle. Really, really wonderful. So, to put a face and a voice to your name. That was awesome. So Bernadette says third-party info, exactly. Third-party info is like playing the game phone line. By the time it gets to one's ears, it's a perception of what they think they heard. Yeah, exactly. Whisper down the lane. Exactly. So that's kind of crazy. Anyway, it's interesting, the fine line between resignation and harmony. Both aspects are found in this word reconcile. We can see reconcile. I'm sorry. We can see resignation, and we can see harmony, and I think it might be like different, as I mentioned, different orbits or different quantum levels of the same thing, because when there's resignation, there's often resentment or sadness or defeat. And when we find a place of harmony, that's finding a place of peace. Resignation is an acknowledgement of the way things are, coupled with resistance in the face of those circumstances, right? The resistance of wanting it to be different. And I think that when we allow things to be as they are, without judgment, when we really give space to allow things to be as they are, then we're giving space for those things to change. And where that statement's coming from is what I see on a daily basis in my practice with the core connection process that I developed. And what we do in that process is we move through whatever's arising, we move through it by being present to it, by experiencing it without judgment, without story, just being present to what's there. And by being present to what's there without judgment, without story, what's there changes. Because I think that we can probably agree that the one constant is change, or at least the illusion of change, that in our physical world, change is a constant. And if we resist change, then we're just creating obstructions for ourselves, right? As we resist change. And that is probably one of the greatest sources of suffering that humanity experiences, is the resistance to change, resistance and resistance to what is, so we have this proclivity to imagine that things shouldn't be the way they are, that things should be different. Maybe we think things should be fair, or we think, well, who knows? We think all these different things, right? And when we get into the should, whenever we recognize the word should, we can recognize that what's happening is there's resistance, right? We're creating obstacles for ourselves. And That is the only obstacles that we experience are obstacles we create. And one of the ways that we can create those obstacles is by defining them as obstacles, defining circumstances in life as an obstacle. We've created an obstacle rather than circumstances in life being as they are and then responding to them in kind and in an appropriate fashion, right? We spend a lot of energy bemoaning the existence of things as they are and resisting it. So maybe like that's one step toward, or maybe multiple steps toward finding this presence and peace is captured in this word reconcile. You know, to be first reconciling ourselves to things being the way they are. There may be some resignation, and then moving from that resignation into a space of harmony and allowing, which releases the resistance. So, you know, I hadn't thought this through before choosing this as a topic. I rarely do, you know, I just, I sit down like 15 minutes before showtime and say, okay, what's today's topic? And, you know, that's generally how it comes. So I hadn't really recognized this process word. I hadn't recognized reconcile as a process word that contains its own transformation. But I think that's a pretty interesting thing to discover. So Bernadette says, I think the biggest and hardest thing of chance is when the information given of a perception is wrong, and then the truth isn't allowed room to be placed into the healing. So information given of a perception is wrong, and then the truth isn't allowed room to be placed into the healing. So if I'm understanding you correctly, Bernadette, what I'm hearing is misunderstanding. And that's kind of what happened in my situation too. There was a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation, and no room to address that misunderstanding, no opportunity to be able to clarify. So that can be really difficult because it can't be placed into the healing. There's no space for the healing. You know, that's what I'm recognizing at this moment in the dynamic with this family member is right now there's no space for healing. There's no will on the part of the other person to reconcile. So there's not a whole lot I can do given that that's the case at the moment. So Dido says, I can testify to the power of the core connection coaching process. It's kind of magical, even with things that seem really set in stone. Thank you, Dido. It's so true. It's so true. I just, the best example was the other day I did a session with a friend, and in the beginning of the session, they said, you know, like, no, that's the way I see it, and nobody can convince me otherwise. You know, unprovoked, I wasn't arguing with them. They just said, you know, that's the way I see it, and that's the way nobody can convince me otherwise. At the end of the session, they said, no, I don't believe that at all. This is what I believe. And I believe that this is the case and nobody can convince me otherwise. It was a total transformation that opened up incredible space for being. It was amazing. And to see that transformation, I see it all the time where people show up feeling like it's the end of the world and come out of the session ready to create the world anew. It's remarkable. And by the way, just shameless plug, I do start a new cohort in January 31st, the beginning of February. I have a couple spots open, and I am offering a complimentary session. so that you get to experience what the work is if you're interested in possibly coaching with me. I call it coaching because people think they know what that means. It gives us a foundation for conversation, but it's really a transformational program. It's very profound. It's life altering. It's 3 months. And if you want to find out more about it, you can go to my website at yourcoreconnection.com. It's right up there. And if you're interested, please reach out to me through direct message on Messenger, but only if you're really open to the possibility of coaching or of a program, being in the program that is life altering. And I can say with certainty that it is. I can guarantee that it will be life altering. So Rosalind says, getting back to our conversation about reconciliation, Rosalind says, gauge your attachment to something or an outcome. Reconciliation is no attachment, becoming the observer rather than the victim mode. And I think that is the higher vibration version of reconciliation for sure. But even in the dictionary definition, there is an aspect of reconciliation that incorporates resignation. So, the higher vibration version is to be at peace, right? To release the victim mode. And Dido says, and the paradox seems to be that when I am present to something without needing to change it, it can shift. Exactly. That's the bizarro thing. When we move to the acceptance and allowing aspect, there's expansiveness in that. We're not resisting. When we're resisting, we're creating this energy of obstruction, right? And that can hold things in place when we resist feeling our feelings for whatever's going on in our lives. When we resist feeling our feelings, we're holding them in place. When we allow them, when we allow ourselves to be present to what's there without judgment or story, and that's the important caveat, then we give space for that thing to move. Absolutely, for it to shift. Thank you for that, Dido. And Dido posted the URL for the website. Thank you so much for that. I so appreciate it. So I think that's it for today. And again, I just find it fascinating that we found the transformational process right within this word. That the word reconcile contains the process. To be in a place of first to resigning ourselves to the way things are, maybe finding resignation and moving from that resignation into a place of allowing and possibility and harmony. It's pretty awesome. So Rosalind says, sometimes their behavior is your answer. Your mind will answer. Oh, sometimes your behavior is your answer. Your mind will answer most questions if you can be a witness to whatever happens. In aligned yes, an aligned yes or an empowered no will happen, and then maybe feel aligned and peace within yourself. So Rosalind, just to wrap this up, I think you're saying that as you ask yourself a question from a space of alignment, you'll get a clear answer of a yes or a no. And we do have that ability. We often then reject the answer because we don't like it. But when we're connected, we can sense into a yes or a no within ourselves, for sure. And that can be part of our clarity. All of it is based in being present, and being present means not resisting what's so. it means being present to what's here and responding rather than reacting to what life presents us with. So with that, thank you, thank you, thank you. Great conversation. As always, I so appreciate you and your engagement and the love and light that you share with the world. So I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. Please, if anybody has the post, has the URL for the fundraiser for Dr. Ruth Anderson, that would be amazing. Hi, Robin, you're getting here just in time for our wrap up. If somebody can put the fundraising site URL in the chat, I would be so thrilled. So Dr. Ruth Anderson, the founder and mastermind and energy behind Enlightened World Network and all the other channels, had her house burned down in the Colorado fires to the ground. And we've set up a fund, actually Terry Angel set up a fund to be collecting donations for her. And I don't know what the website is. Somebody's got to find it. I should keep it up so that I have it available. I really want to put that up before I leave. So I'm hoping somebody will get to it. I agree, Robin, better late than never. Let me just see if I can find this from yesterday. So it should be here from yesterday morning. Let me see. Hold on. I know it was a PayPal link. And where could it be? Oh my gosh, here it is. I found it. Okay, let me get this link up for you guys. Oh, Dido, I knew you'd beat me to it. Darn. Okay, well, I really appreciate you putting it in there. And thank you for finding it. And please share it out to people. I don't know if you can, but I can't imagine losing everything. Having my life's possessions burned down with all the memories and all the treasured possessions, and for my whole family. So I just really encourage you to please share this with other people, that they may also be able to offer support. Ruth has changed the lives of so many people through her generosity and brilliance in creating Enlightened World Network and creating a large community of people who are spiritually seeking, spiritually aware, holding light and sharing light for the planet. So please, let's support her in whatever way we can. And so much love to you all. Until next time, so much love and appreciation. So until next time, take care.